Thank you for joining us this morning for our November monthly Heritage panel. I want to give a huge thank you and our appreciation to our panelists and our moderator today, who will introduce themselves in a minute. But this month is a special month as we celebrate National Adoption Month. And these are all families that are adoptive families. And they'll be talking about that reality of their identity and their selves and their families. And so this is really special that we have this opportunity to learn more about that experience. So thank you for being here. We do this every month throughout the school year. Half of them are in person like this, half of them are recorded podcasts, but all of them are recorded. The podcasts are just on Zoom. The in-person are also uploaded to our YouTube channel, so at any time people can go back and re-watch the previous months that we've done, as well as this month's panel. Our strategic plan, the first pillar of the plan, is all about culture and community. Our number one priority is to build a healthy community where people are welcome, where people love to be here because they feel known, they identify as who they are and feel proud of that at our school. And so this is one of the many different strategic priorities we have related to building community in really celebrating who we are as ISI. And so I hope today we can all enjoy and appreciate this part of who we are, because it helps us all understand ourselves and each other a little bit better. So thank you again, panelists. Thank you, Darren, our moderator, and enjoy the National Adoption Month panel.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Liz. Yeah, round of applause for Liz. None of this happens without the coordination from Liz and the team here. And just thank you for all our ISI employees, staffers. My name is Darren Ho. I am a parent of 3 children here in the Mandarin track. Lauren, Polson, and Reagan are in 7th grade, 6th grade, and then Reagan's in 4th grade. This panel was started about a year and a half ago when we felt it was important that ISI live its values, particularly the one value of respect. Respect is something that we talk a lot about. And respect is often sometimes we don't see as much in the public scene as much, and we certainly want to see it in our school amongst our people. Respect is amongst people. And one area of respect that we feel we need to continue to uphold is a respect for each other's story. In fact, I remember when, not my children, but a child in our school, I overheard them say, "You should not tell my story for me." And it's so important that we do not try to tell someone else's story unless we know that story and we're willing to share it out of respect versus just assume what it is. So to help prepare our children for the world stage, to help our children achieve what this mission of the school is, to be leaders in the global stage, I think it's important we double down on respect. In particular, teach our children how to tell their story. So that's what these panels were about. We were helping our parents learn how to tell their story and hopefully transmit that to helping their children tell their story. Coming from a multicultural Asian background, it's very easy to assume I am a particular type of culture and not multiple cultures. And that's what America is so amazing about, is that we are multiple cultures. So this month for Adoption Month, we want to bring in that factor of, gosh, what is it like to have and go through a process of a type of family that includes adopting a child? And things that go around with that, I don't know a lot about. So we're gonna listen to, and I hope if you don't know about it, you'll listen and respect the stories that are coming out today. And if you're a part of an adoptive family or adopted, we hope to hear from you as well, to chime in, maybe ask some questions at the end. We'll leave some time to ask your panelists some questions. So without further ado, I'm going to start from left to right and have our panelists introduce themselves, tell us your ISI story, and tell us a bit about your personal cultural heritage.
Okay. So I'm Lisa White. My husband and I, Jeremiah, have been proud ISI parents for about 9 years now. We have 3 boys at the school. Teddy's in 6th grade, Cameron's in 4th grade, and Santi is in the early years program, all in the Spanish track. I grew up on the East Coast in New Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia. My cultural heritage is more of, I don't know, I like to describe it as kind of a European mutt. I have ancestors that came over here from Ireland, Scotland, England, Portugal. So, yeah, everywhere. Yes, exactly. All over the place. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi. There we go. Hi, I'm Angie Cahoon. This is my 6th year at ISI. I've had 2 boys come through ISI in the high school program. Evan was class of 2023, and Boston is class of 2025. And then we actually have 4 children. The youngest 2 are at North Central High School. And they are sophomores, or a sophomore and another senior. So.
You do want to talk about your
Oh, my culture. I grew up Roman Catholic, urban community. In fact, I think I was in high school before I met anyone that wasn't Catholic. In Minneapolis, Minnesota. So very urban area. Prince lived down the street. And that was kind of the area I grew up in, and came to Indiana and met a whole bunch of other types of people than my little cluster was.
Wow, fascinating. And just to make sure the audience knows who Prince is, right? We're not-
Yes.
Right, okay.
The artist formerly.
Okay, just want to make sure we have a different generation out there. So, okay, thank you for sharing, Angie.
Hi everyone, my name is Kim Pickett. I have been an ISI parent for 3 years now. My daughter Ella is in the 1st grade Spanish track. My husband Jeff and I have a blended family with 3 older children. Actually, we have a sophomore or a freshman in North Central. So, and then 2 older that are in college. I grew up in a German Catholic family. In Dayton, Ohio, my dad was in the Navy, so for the early years of my life, I was traveling around. We were Guam, Florida, and actually Spain for the first few years of my education when I was younger, and then ended up in Dayton and landed here in Indianapolis about 15 years ago.
Well, Dan.
Hi everybody, my name is Dan Willis. Along with my wife Amy Willis, we have 1 son here at the school, Eddie. He is a senior this year, and we have fingers crossed that he will be a freshman in college next year. He's been here since he was 4 years old, so he's an ISI lifer. I was born in Southeast Texas, grew up as kind of a country boy, worked cattle ranches, the whole thing. I've lived in 7 different states all over the country. Was kind of a nomad for a while. I've been kind of an entrepreneur for my whole life. My cultural heritage is on my father's side. My grandmother was from Hungary. She came through Ellis Island in the early 1900s. So I'm a quarter Hungarian. The rest of me is, a United States mutt. On my mother's side, we lived our history to the Civil War and can't trace it back past that, so we're not quite sure. And that's my story.
Thanks, Dan. Well, we want to get right into this concept of adoption, and oftentimes people want to know why did this come about for your family? And it's different for everybody. And then how does that affect your family? The process of adopting versus a natural birth. So I'm just going to ask Kim to start out with this. Yeah, tell us about that process of discerning to adopt, and tell us who your children are that you've adopted, and maybe a little bit about their story.
Sure.
Yes.
And first of all, I love what you said about telling your own story. That's something that the agency that I use talked a lot about. With adoption is that we're experiencing a story as parents, but really the child is experiencing another story, and it's their job to tell that story for their life when they're ready and discover that story. So our youngest, Ella, is adopted, and I would say from a traditional sense, my family was created a little backwards. I was a single mother when I adopted her. I was at a point in my life where I was pushing 40, and I knew I wanted a child. I met someone who had adopted as a single mother. She really helped me understand that that was possible and that you could do that without, I have no family here in Indianapolis. You could have a support system and really find a way to make that possible. And she really encouraged me, connected me with an agency. And I know we're probably going to talk about difficult parts later, but I got turned away from an agency because I was a single mother and they did not feel that that was a good match for them. So I ended up matching with a different agency, and Ella came along very quickly for me. I went through a background check, a home study, my profile went live, and the private agency that I used, the birth mother chooses who the adoptive parent would be. It's not like you get in line and, hey, you're next.
Right.
They really feel that the birth mother or birth parent should choose who will parent the child going forward. And so my profile was approved, and the agency was very realistic with me. You're probably going to wait about 2 years now. You are a single parent. Most birth mothers or birth parents might choose a 2-parent household, so just be patient. And so on October 3rd, 2018, my profile went live, and on October 4th, 2018, I got a call that said, a baby girl has been born. You can come to the hospital and meet her. The mother chose you. So it was the craziest time that you can imagine. I had nothing. I had travel plans, I had a life, I had no crib, no stroller, nothing. And it was amazing to see my family and friends come together and welcome her. So,
A lot of joy.
a lot of joy.
A lot of joy. And no crib.
No crib. You don't need a crib, guys.
Don't need a crib.
But people plan forever for pregnancies. I learned you can do it at the drop of a hat, honestly.
A lot of joy.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. That's wow, what a unique story. And there's a lot of intertwining of how the process went. It's going to be different for everyone, so it'd be great to hear about each of your processes, and how Ella is now going to have a very cool starting story. I'm going to go with Dan next.
As far as the adoption process for us, adoption was always a part of Amy and I's family plan. It was part of it from the very beginning. So we looked into domestic adoption and international adoption options. It's interesting that you can have a biological child anytime you would like, but to adopt a child is a process, and it's very, very different. We adopted Eduardo from Guatemala, and it was at a time when they were beginning to shut down adoptions in Guatemala. So we had some particularly tense moments trying to get him naturalized and into the United States. For a period of time, we thought we might be living in Guatemala. But we were fortunate that we were able to have him come here and live with us in the United States. So we met Eduardo when he was 6 months old, and we were able to bring him back home when he was a year and a week. Again, his story is his story to tell. I don't have permission to know whether I want to tell it. So if he decides to share that at some point, he's welcome to do so. Our process was, I'm not going to say it was simple, but it wasn't overly difficult. We chose Guatemala because we know people there. My wife does work down there. The process was pretty cut and dry. It was an adoption world where most of the children lived in foster families instead of hogars so it was a good environment that we understood. process was not 3 years long, like it might be some places. It was 6 to 12 months long. So we chose that pretty thoughtfully, and we're very, very glad that we did. As we say to anybody who will listen, if you've ever seen the movie Raising Arizona, we think we got the best one.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah. I got a chance to meet and hang out with Eddie a bit, and it's great to know that there's a story behind the story of the young man that I got to meet. So I'm looking forward to hearing that from him. Yeah. Angie?
So our process for adoption, a little bit different, because we did not know the day that our 2 children moved in that they were going to be staying. I am a foster care alumnus, and while I was dating my husband Phil, who was a minister's son and the son of a psychiatric nurse, I was like, I want to do this someday. He's like, we got family support, we can do that. And 6 years later, after we had,
You're good. Yeah, keep
Yeah.
going. They're gonna hear
6
you.
years,
No matter
yes,
what.
6 years later, after we had Evan and Boston, our birth children, we decided to become licensed foster parents. And we thought we were just going to be fostering preschool kids. But one of the pieces about fostering, and if you have somebody over the age of 5, is the social worker that does your family home study has to sit down with the child that's 5 or older and ask them what they think, just what they think. And Evan looked right at the individual and said, well, whoever comes in is going to be my brother or sister for life. And the social worker pulled us aside and said, you might want to look at long-term care options like foster to adopt situations. Within 6 months of that conversation, we had our foster care license with a preference for foster to adopt. And the week that we got our call for the 4-year-old girl that also had a place name, like our 2 older ones, because her name is Jordan, was like, that was our 3rd call that week for potential placement. The others had fallen to other foster families. They sold me on this 4-year-old girl, and towards the end of the conversation, they said, oh, by the way, she has a 5-year-old brother. And I know you said you didn't want 5-year-olds, but can you talk? And within 24 hours, the sibling group, Hayden and Jordan, moved into our family. And it was 2 weeks before Boston's 6th birthday. So we had a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 6-year-old by the end of the month of November that year in 2012. And they haven't left. They are here and part of our hearts.
Wow, wow. What an abundance of room in your hearts in the amount of that time. I think if you notice these stories, I don't know if you thought you would expect a standard story. There is, none of us have a standard story. And even just the adoption process, there's 3 unique adoption processes here, so we can't wait to hear about yours.
Yes, so for our adoption process, we already had our 2 boys, Teddy and Cameron, and we decided that we wanted to go, well, we kind of looked at both international and domestic route. International made more sense for our family. We ended up selecting Colombia for a variety of reasons, but a lot of it was our older boys were already, learning Spanish here, so it kind of made some sense to do a Spanish-speaking country. Colombia also is part of the Hague, so we kind of knew the process, while it was still long, would at least be, like there's some steps and everything that they follow that some countries don't necessarily follow. So it just seemed like it would be a smoother process. With all that being said, we were initially told we will never get a baby, and we said that's fine. We already basically at that point, I think Teddy was almost 5 and Cameron was almost 3. So, but we knew it was going to probably be a 2 to 3 year process. So we figured, well, by the time, this child comes along, they'll be, 7 and 5, so, a 2 or 3-year-old would roll right in. So we've been in the process for literally a little over 2 years. Initially, they had also said you could kind of pick gender. And so we already had 2 boys, so we said, okay, well, I guess if we can pick, we'll go with a girl. Well, yeah, then that got thrown out the door. So literally the week the world shut down with COVID, we got the phone call that they were like, oh, we have your referral, we have your child. And we're like, okay, great. And they were like, it's a 3-month-old baby boy. And we were like, I'm sorry, 3 months? I thought this was gonna be like a 3-year-old. So anyway, his name was Santiago. They were already starting to call him Santi. In the orphanage, his birth mother already had, I think, 4 other children, just, couldn't take care of another one. Some of the other children were already with other family members. So he was at an orphanage, but literally because this all happened the week the world shut down, generally speaking, you travel within a few weeks, maybe a couple months tops.
Sure.
Well, time kind of went on, and it was finally like 6 months later that he's now almost a 9-month-old. And we've been kind of FaceTiming him, which you can only imagine FaceTiming a baby who speaks another language, like the boys were trying to speak Spanish to him and stuff. So it was a little challenging. But anyway, they finally called us like last week of August that year 2020. And they said, hey, can you be on a humanitarian flight like in 3 days? And we're like, sure. So, and we were like, well, how long are we gonna be there? And they were like, we don't know. It could be 3 weeks, it could be 3 months. So we were like, okay. Kind of cue in the grandparents. Mind you, my parents live on the East Coast. Jeremiah's parents spent some of their time in Texas, sometime in Indiana. His mom's here in Indiana. So the grandparents all kind of came through, helped us all out. We ended up being in country for a total of 5 weeks to finish the process and everything, because you go down there and there's a whole lot of paperwork you have to do. But the cool thing is his Encuentro Day, or Gotcha Day, ended up being our wedding anniversary as well. September 19th, 2020. So yeah, so that was pretty cool. And now, I can't imagine our life without him. So yeah.
Well, let's go to that, and then we'll come down the road with this. Let's go with that. For Santi being part of the family, how has it changed the family dynamic? Since the kids were a bit older, and what is it like in your family now, having Santi?
Well, it's 3 boys, so it's pure chaos. And they're brothers, and they don't skip a beat. Like they don't, the older boys treat him just like they would, they all love each other, they all hate each other because they're brothers. But he's really, I think he's kind of taught the boys too that we don't all have to be exactly the same to still be a family. And that's what's super cool. And like we'll go out to places and sometimes people will be like, oh, that's your son over there too. Now mind you, my other 2 boys, if you know our family, have bright red hair, and my husband and I are both brunettes. So there's a lot of times where people are just like, did you adopt all of them?
Right.
We did not. So, we sometimes definitely get questions, we get looks. We went down to Colombia. We've been down there twice now since we adopted him. We've taken the other boys down there. And that's the other cool thing is we've really, really adopted the Colombian culture. We have a Colombian nanny right now. Actually, Santi, his teacher this year is Colombian, which is super cool. One of Teddy's teachers in the middle school is Colombian. We just absolutely love it down there. But when we go down there, we'll even have Colombians come up to us and be like, what is going on here? How does this family go together? But then you tell the story and they're like, oh, that's really cool. And then we spent this summer as a family in Asia, actually mostly in Tokyo, for my husband's work. And again, there it was like, okay, how does this family all go together? But, so it's really cool. So sometimes there's some explaining to do. But, I think once people realize, oh, we're a family, they're like, oh, wow, that's a really, really neat way to have a family put together.
Yes. I mean, family in itself, root of community, we're seeing, right? It can be from a whole bunch of different ways we consider family. And nobody wants to reject family. People want to know about family.
Yeah.
And yet, family can also be very troublesome. So when they see a family that is uniquely placed, and there's a story behind it that's inspiring, I think that's inspiring for the hope of family. So thank you for sharing. Yeah, Angie.
So let me build a little bit off of
Awesome.
that piece with the family and embracing. My children are from southern Indiana, sibling group. My husband is from Northern Indiana, so we really didn't bring in another culture, and yet we did, because my children had experienced a very rural area and extreme poverty for multiple generations. And so we were bringing in, like, very, very simple of my 5-year-old when he moved in, asked how long we were gonna stay at that house. Because A, he had been a foster kid and moved frequently, and B, even in his first family, he moved frequently. And when we looked at him and said, oh, we moved here before Boston was born, so we've been here 7 years, it really blew his mind. And so we brought in a different type of culture combination. And I think we have developed some great traditions around how to kind of balance the change in economic status for our family, especially for those two. And yes, I would argue that right now they are siblings to the core. We get a lot of questions about Boston and Hayden being twins because, oh, you have 2 seniors. No, they are exactly 120 days apart. They were both born on the 28th of the month, just different months. And Jordan came 11 months later on the 28th of the month. Our family was meant to be together, but there was that piece of how do we incorporate 2 who have not experienced stability or even consistency into a family that is incredibly consistent.
Yes.
So,
And it sounds like it's still going on.
at 12, so we're 12 years in.
Yeah.
And I think that what happens now is much more along the lines of, I look out at Boston's classmates, and one of the reasons Boston chose ISI for high school was his brother was not choosing ISI because he wanted to go to a place where he could choose whether or not to tell the story that he is part of an adopted family.
Right.
But I look out here and I'm pretty certain this isn't news to any of his classmates that he is now that he is part of an adopted family.
Right.
But he needed that time because everyone knew at his K through 8 school because they were with us through the process. So I think we've embraced it.
I think so. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing.
Sure. So obviously, as I said earlier, Ella sort of started the family for me, and from an extended family point of view, that was just a wonderful, I think, education for everyone. And I think that while there had been adoptions maybe in my family in the past, adoption was something that wasn't talked about. You know, we had family members that were forced to adopt when they had children at a young age or placed for adoption. And so everything that I had heard about adoption up until this point had been more closed. And I really wanted Ella to have an open story. I wanted it to not only be her story, but it to be something that she was very comfortable with. And as our family grew and I met my husband and we blended our family, it's been wonderful for her. She is biracial. My husband is Black, and so his children are biracial as well. And so if you saw our family walking on the street, you would assume Ella was our child. And I think many people have said to me, oh, I didn't realize she was adopted, which is also fine for us. You know, we're good with that. And so, but it is a piece of her, and it has built our family differently. What we're experiencing now is actually as a result of the international parade. Ella feels very like, why am I Germany?
Oh.
And I said, well, that's my culture, and I know that's my culture, and I don't know your whole culture. And so we recently did an ancestry DNA test for her, so that she now feels more connected to her heritage and can determine next year, she's already choosing which country she's gonna go with. But we're doing my husband as well because his ancestry only goes back a certain amount of time in the United States. And you know, where did I come from and how did I get here and how do maybe those paths cross? So it's opened up more conversations in our family, which has been really nice and just, it's been great.
Great story. Thanks for sharing.
So, as far as our family, Eddie is our family, so he gets all the attention. That's the good news, and it's also the bad news that he gets all the attention. I'm sure he would agree. So we spent about 7 weeks in Guatemala during the time, from the time that we received the phone call that we've been matched with him, and we went down 5 times over the course of 6 months. And the last time we went down, it basically said we're not leaving until we come back with our son. So we were down there for about 2 weeks at that point. So our family is always, you know, Eduardo has never been overly curious about Guatemala. He didn't recognize his language superpower until fairly recently. Occasionally would even push it away. So, you know, we have what I think is a pretty normal family when it comes to the optics of our family, which is different for every adopted family. Especially in the summertime, I can pass for Indo-European if I have to, so there's never much in the way of questions there. But my wife is as New England as it comes, and occasionally she'll get a question or a look. But it has never been anything that's been interesting. The language that's used is the interesting thing to me sometimes. Things such as, where is he from? To which I answer, I think what you're asking is, where was he born? Because he's from Indiana. You know, and try to gently and politely teach language to people when it comes to adoption and adopted families. It's never with malice, but it's always with a little bit of lack of knowledge. So that's one of the things that I think most people could learn is that an adopted family is a family. You can call it an adopted family, you can call it an adopted child or a biological child, but it's your child. It hurts just as bad when they hurt. You are just as nervous waiting for the mail. You're just as mad when they do things that they shouldn't do. You're just as joyful when they do things that they should. When they achieve things that you think they couldn't. So there's no difference in our family, except that we also get to go to Guatemala and have a great time down there and enjoy that culture as much. So we feel doubly blessed in our family.
Thank you, Dan. It's beautiful. I don't know about you guys. I mean, I'm thinking about my family and how much, and I hope you're thinking about yours and how rich and diverse storylines that you all come from. I'm looking out there, and there's stories like this out there, and stories within all of you, especially the students out there, that you don't know about from each other. And that's the beauty of why we come to this school, because if there's any school in this place, in this state, we should be able to really respectfully talk about these stories and embrace them. I'm going to ask panelists to just maybe, because they've shared some challenges, you've heard some of the challenges of the process, the culturalization, the wait a second, do they belong to you stuff. Even for a non-adopted family, where are you born and where you're from are very controversial for my family. But I'd love to maybe ask each of you to share a bit of hope for this process of adoption and why adoption might be important. What's the future of adoption for where we live here in this country right now? It struck you as an option to build a family and to have a family. And everyone out there has a story probably adjacent to adoptive family too. So maybe a thought of hope for what you see in the future for adoption. And I'm going to start with Ange on this one.
What I see and what I've seen my 2 biological children embrace is a curiosity and a openness to other stories. Not necessarily other cultures, other stories, but a deep respect. We were not ISI family K through 8. We spent 13 years at another school with our 4 children, and both of my oldest 2, my biological 2, wanted to be around a place where other stories were respected. And they wanted to be at a place where they could be known. And so to me, that desire to be known, I think, is consistent across every teenager that ever exists. But it's that desire that I think is the story of hope that adoptive families can bring, is that it cultivates the very, very beginning.
For me, I think the message of hope is that however you build your family is right for you. I've talked to a couple of different people here today, and the message that I heard was you get the child that you were meant to get. And whether you have that child naturally, whether you adopt a family member, whether you adopt from another country, I really believe that it is the openness and connection to other cultures that I love as the hope for adoption in the future. Just that we are all people, and families are made in a million different ways. And
As far as message of hope, I think they're sitting here in the room in the senior class and the other kids. I think all you have to do to understand that kids these days are different than we were is, I don't know, watch the movie The Birdcage with them. They don't think it's funny because we thought it was funny because it was taboo. These days, it's so normal. Adoption is normal. Difference is normal, especially in this school. Difference is normal. I'm not sure I can tell this, so I'll be anonymous. I heard a story once when my son was in, I think, 3rd or 4th grade, and one of his classmates came home and told his mom that he wasn't like everybody else. And he said, I just want to be adopted from Guatemala like my friends, because there were 4 adopted Guatemalans in his class. So, kids just want to be kids with other kids. There's a woman in Guatemala, her name is Monterey Inez Ayala, and she runs an orphanage there and has forever. And she did a documentary one time when they were shutting down adoptions in Guatemala and the reasons that they were. And she said, she summed it up that children don't need a country, children need love. And I think so long as we keep that in mind, that adoptions will live on and be great forever.
Lisa.
I think, the agency that we used, their motto was adoption is love. But they also didn't sugarcoat it either. They gave us a lot of trauma-based education that we had to do, which there were times where I remember Jeremiah and I sitting there being like, oh, another module. But I'm so glad that we had that education, because even though we adopted our child when he was an infant, he's already at the almost age of 5 starting to ask questions of, okay, I don't look exactly like you, my skin's different, he knows he's from Colombia, but having that education and also just knowing that children that are adopted often come from hard places, whether it's, subconsciously as an infant or an older child that's adopted, just being able to give parents that educational tools to, I think, can provide a lot of help and security and hope as you go through that process, and eventually let your child tell their own story, even though they were adopted at a very young age or a little older.
There's a reality to the process.
There is a reality to the process, absolutely.
To the human nature of what is
Yeah.
going on here.
And I think even, no matter what, when you're parenting, I don't parent him any differently, even though the older boys will say sometimes I do. And I'm like, well, that's just because he's the baby. It has nothing to do with him being adopted. It's just he's the third, order, But you parent them with love, but sometimes a little tough love.
Yeah, of course.
So, yeah.
Wow. I want to thank every one of you just for being brave and being honest, being open to share your story. What was it like to share your story here today? I'll start with you, Dan. What was it like?
I share the story all the time. I think more and more it's not a closed situation. So sharing the story was just the same as it always is. I love it. If anybody ever wants to know more detail about the process or the nuance, feel free to pull me aside. I'm happy to talk about it forever.
I said the same thing when Liz sent the invitation for this. I said, I don't know if you want me to talk about adoption because I could take up a lot of time. I think the story is wonderful to tell. I mostly love hearing other people's stories. And like Sharon said, we all adopted very differently. And I love hearing the uniqueness of everyone's story.
So I kind of do it regularly in my professional career as I work with others. But I think this piece was being more mindful that the audience knows my children. And so being more respectful of those limits than what I'm used to in a day in and day out basis. And that has given me a lot of hope, is knowing that there's different ways to tell the story depending upon the audience. And I think that that's just a wonderful lesson for us all to know.
I mean, we always love sharing our story. We're big adoption advocates, always happy to talk to people about, if they're looking into the process. So yeah, always very happy to share.
You guys appreciate it very much, and we have plenty of time now to ask if the audience has any questions at all. And we'll pass the mic around, and we'd love to field questions since these are very seasoned speakers on the topic, and they're certainly passionate about it. It brings a lot of vibrant culture to our community. Let's ask away.
Jeff?
I know you all have different situations. How have you handled where it's available connections with birth families? That's one we deal with.
So my children moved in with a reunification plan. I got the opportunity to know their, well, not know, but meet, converse with their first mom, their first dad, their first grandparents. And I think the piece that has been most important for my children is collecting the information from those families and family members to help my children understand that why they ended up in foster care was not intentional, it wasn't malicious, it was a combination of situations that came about. And now as they're teenagers, and one is 4 months from making the decision on whether or not he is going to keep his first family in his life, we're having really good conversations about what is a healthy relationship, what is a friend, and boundaries with relationships so that he can kind of make that decision as he feels empowered. He is a 17-year-old boy, not really loving those conversations, but I do see my 16-year-old daughter really wanting to have some of that, those really, what are red flags, what are things to be working through, and connecting with random family members like cousins that were not involved in any of this, but might be 2 years older, and learning from them, and finding that little sense of heritage. So in that way, social media has been a gift for us because she can reach out, find out what she wants to know, hide the person, and kind of process and go back. So, yeah.
Anybody else have
We don't really know who the birth parents are, other than a name of a mother on a birth certificate. The orphanage gave us a little bit of info. Interestingly enough, Santi did ask me the other day what her name was. So I pulled out the birth certificate and told her, and then he just looked at me like a normal 4-year-old would and said, okay, and like walked away. But Jeremiah and I have already talked if and when he ever does want to potentially find out more information about his birth family, that we would be willing to try to help, but I'm assuming it's gonna require like a private investigator or something like that. But he does have 4 half-siblings in Colombia or wherever they are, and they range anywhere from the age of, at this point, probably to about 20 years old, down to there was one that was only a couple years older than him, so probably about a 6 or 7-year-old. So, yeah, so if and when he ever wants to find that out, we certainly will be very supportive and help him as much as we can, but we don't, the orphanage said, well, we don't really know who the birth father was, because the birth mother said she didn't know. It was one of those kinds of situations.
Similar here. That's driven by our son. We have a folder that anybody can access whenever they want with what little information we have from Guatemala. It's there, and that's how we handle that.
So one thing, kind of side note, when you say you have a birth certificate, I love that. I love that you have a birth certificate with her name on. I don't know if it's Indiana or the United States, but when you adopt a child, you get a new birth certificate, and it erases their birth parent off of there. And my name is on her birth certificate, even though I did not give birth to her. And that's the hard part for me, because I want her to have the whole piece of the story, and obviously I hold that. But we do have an open adoption. I do have contact with her birth mother. It has been a wonderful experience. I, again, am collecting that information for when it's time for her to seek that out. My job now is just to know that when she's ready and wants to learn more and find things out, that's her decision. I just want to always have contact and an open relationship, so I know where to send her when she's ready. Yeah.
Yeah, so we still have the Colombian birth certificate, but we did also get an Indiana birth certificate. Yeah.
But I love that you have that. I think that's really nice.
Yeah.
We have time for another question? Other questions?
So when looking back at like the adoption process, would you say it was more stressful for the parent or for the child that was being adopted? And how did you deal with this?
That's a great question. Take that one. That's a great question. Depends on the age of the child. When they're 6 months to a year, I can guarantee you it's more stressful on the parent. But again, it also depends on the child. You guys all know Eddie. He might have been the happiest 6 to 12-month-old you've ever met in your life. I know that's hard to believe these days, but that was the case with him. So it didn't seem stressful on him at all, although I'm sure it was in its own way. But it was very stressful for us.
So, I think part of it is our process, because my children lived with us for 13 months before they knew that they were home. And so there were stages and steps throughout that process where the therapist or the social worker shared your parents have lost their parental rights, and what that means in 5-year-old language. That's a little weird to try and talk to a 5-year-old about. And then kind of as we went on to you're staying here, they are adopting you. And we weren't allowed to tell them, the therapist had to tell them. Because they had to have the right to say no, which is wonderful and great and stressful. So in that situation, my children, I think, went through probably just as much stress, because they were 7 and 8 when we actually finalized the adoption, and they were being asked every month for 6 months in a row whether or not they wanted to be adopted by the Cahoons. That's stressful.
I apologize I came in late. I'm Mr. Peete. I work with a lot of these seniors. I have shared this before. I really applaud what you're doing with your children. A number of reasons. I grew up in the 70s. I was an adopted kid during the 70s, so I went through this as a child. But what was interesting during the 70s for a lot of you who are about my age here is that there was a sense of embarrassment at that time. I was born probably, or I came into this world in the summer of '69 to random people ran across the field. That's what happened. But my parents told me, my mom told me when I was 15, right? And it wasn't because, she tried not to tell me, she just didn't know how, because at that time there was a stigma about, well, if your child is out of wedlock and comes to this world through, the leftovers of the seeds of the 60s, so to speak, then we just don't talk about it. So as a growing boy, from 15 to 16, and then realizing my sister was a natural, we're going to use the term natural born, or in this case, biological. So she was biological and I wasn't. So finding that identity, and especially with parents who love me very much, and I'm sure this was some of the seniors, and Eddie knows this as well, we talked about this, but tried to find that identity really separately in a world where you didn't have the support that you're sharing. That you're, like as you were saying about the files that are open and the conversations that were. So I just wanted to make that mention. We've come a long way with that, and it doesn't matter if it's the countries Canada, the United States, or Colombia. It's how we view the adoption and try to erase those stigmas. So these are great kids over there. I know a number of them go through that too. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeffrey. That's really good add to this conversation. Really, really good added perspective. Appreciate that. Yeah.
We can do one more question.
Yeah, one more question.
No.
Good.
We have an audience plant.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you handle the challenges of filling out family medical histories?
Wow, that's a practical challenge.
I'm happy to start. I think when asked the question, what's one of the hardest parts of adoption, it's the unknown and not having those pieces of the puzzle. We can have as much in a file as we want and collect, but when you're going to the doctor all the time, Ella had a lot of health issues when she was younger, and there's no family history, there's no, and you just kind of have to take what you know and work with it. And as parents, we love our children and we do anything to take care of them. So I find that piece the hardest, the medical history and just the piece of the puzzle. But I just try to take questions from her as they come, and we address the challenges as they come, and that's all you can do, because none of us really know everything. I mean, I wish I knew my own medical history, and I had 2 parents that, I grew up with, and sometimes you just don't know it, so do the best you can.
So my daughter had surgery yesterday, and it was interesting watching her navigate that, because I have always done that, but she's 16 now. And one of the things that they ask, especially the first time you have anesthesia, is what's the family history with anesthesia? And she looks at me and we're like, we don't know, but we do know that there's a lot of gingers in her family. And that does play a piece into the anesthesia. And so it was great to see her be like, we don't know, like just own that. What she does know though is, heart history, some of the other real practical pieces, and coming to that realization that some of it matters and some of it just is them trying to protect themselves from harming you. And so that's been really good to learn that lesson, because I didn't have that at 17 and 18. That part of the medical community is just gathering information to protect themselves from harming you. And that is a perspective that I think all 4 of my children now own and hold.
Well, how about a round of applause for our panelists? Thank you all. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here and being a part of this community and participating. Just being present is participating with the storytelling that we're doing every single month. I'm going to turn it over to Liz to wrap us up today. And thank you, Liz.
Thank you all again for being here. We're going to do one more round of applause for our great panelists. Thank you so much. When I listen to our panelists and to Darren, I feel so grateful that I am able to be in this community and that my children are able to be in this community and tell their story, as hopefully all of us here today have been able to reflect on who we all are and why that story is so important. And so thank you for inspiring us and for being part of this amazingly special and distinct community that we get to have in the middle of Indianapolis. So I feel extremely grateful this morning as well. Thank you for your bravery, for your courage. Your voice, what you say, is really important and impactful, and it has impacted us, but also the people who will be watching the video. This will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and so the whole community can watch it as well into the future. So we'll have another panel next month, and thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.